The smell of fresh flowers hit me before I even opened my eyes. It wasn't strong, but just enough to cut through the stale air of the room, mingling with the faint aroma of pancakes and orange juice. For a second, I felt peace. Warm sunlight slipped through the blinds, dancing gently across the blanket that covered me. On the bedside table sat a silver tray with a white napkin, 2 perfectly folded pancakes drizzled with honey, a glass of juice with beads of condensation running down the side, and a note. Just a simple note, handwritten in soft cursive. "Today, you'll finally be free." I stared at the paper, confused, still half asleep. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard. Free? From what? From bills? From the stress of work? From the long hours and late nights that had become routine? I thought maybe it was Amanda's poetic way of celebrating our wedding anniversary. She always did have a dramatic flair. Maybe she meant free from the past, from the struggles we both endured to build a life together. I smiled. My heart softened. Maybe things were finally turning a corner. Amanda was in the kitchen, humming something low and sweet. She looked beautiful in the morning light, her hair tied loosely, wearing the robe I bought her last Christmas. There was something calm about her face, the kind of calm that made you feel like everything was finally okay. For a second, I believed it. Then the doorbell rang. 3 short chimes. Sharp, unapologetic. My stomach tightened. "Move!" Amanda, she kept stirring something in a pan, her back turned, her shoulders stiff. I glanced at her, confused. Usually, she was the first to rush to the door, always eager to greet whoever it was. But that morning, she stayed still, silent. I got up and headed to the door. I remember the floor was cold beneath my feet. I remember how quiet everything suddenly became. I opened it. 2 men stood there, dark suits, stern expressions, badges out. Their presence filled the doorway like a wall. "Emilio Ramirez?" one of them asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "We have a removal order issued under Section 237 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. You need to come with us." My blood ran cold. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they had the wrong person. Maybe it was someone else. But then I saw the paperwork. My name, my date of birth, my Mexican passport number, my face on a copy of a DMV photo I didn't even remember taking. And then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, I turned my head slightly. Across the room, through the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Amanda. She was watching from behind the curtain. Her face wasn't panicked. It wasn't even sad. She was smiling. Not big, not wide, but there was a glint in her eyes, like satisfaction, like she had been waiting for this moment. That was when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't random. It wasn't some cruel twist of fate. She had planned it. She had called. Them. The woman I married. The woman I cooked for. The woman I worked double shifts for. The woman I trusted with my secrets. She had turned me in, and she chose today. Our anniversary. I was frozen. My hands trembled as one of the agents asked me to step outside. Amanda stayed in the kitchen, still humming, still calm. The neighbors' dogs barked in the distance. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. The world kept moving. But for me, everything had stopped. I asked the agent if I could. He allowed it. I walked back inside like a ghost, each step echoing through the hollow house. I avoided looking at Amanda. I was afraid of what I'd see. Not fear, not regret, just the coldness of betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed and tied my shoelaces. The tray was still there. The pancakes were getting cold. The note still lay flat, like a cruel joke. "Today, you'll finally be free. Free from my home. Free from the life I fought to build for nearly 2 decades. I didn't even know I was living." I stood up, took one last look around the room, and followed the agents outside. The sun was blinding. The air smelled of cut grass and gasoline. A white van was parked by the curb. The back doors were open. The neighbors peeked through their windows. Curtains shifted. Eyes watched. No one spoke. No one moved. The agents didn't cuff me. They didn't need to. I wasn't resisting. I had nothing left to resist with. As I climbed into the van, one last time, Amanda stood on the porch. She waved. I don't know what was colder, the morning breeze or that smile on her face. I closed my eyes, and all I could think was one question. Why? If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from the person you trusted most, I want to hear your story. Write in the comments, I know how that feels. Your voice might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, Subscribe to this channel. Every story shared here is a voice for the voiceless, a reminder that even in silence, we are never truly alone. I met Amanda in the most ordinary of ways, on a Tuesday afternoon while delivering a catering order to a downtown office in Austin. She worked reception for a marketing firm, the kind of place filled with glass walls and people who smiled too wide. She was wearing a green blouse that matched her eyes, her dark red hair pulled into a bun that had started to fall apart by mid-afternoon. She laughed when I apologized for being 5 minutes late, said it was the first delivery that didn't smell like plastic or disappointment. I chuckled and said something dumb about my grandmother's recipe. She said, "If your food is as warm as your voice, I might forgive the delay." That's how it started. I wasn't looking for anyone. I had come to the U.S. with one goal: to work, to send money home, to keep my head down and survive. Love was a luxury. Romance was something for people with freedom and documents. But Amanda, she didn't look at me like I was invisible. She looked right through the layers of fear and fatigue and saw something I hadn't felt in years. She saw me. We started talking, then texting. A coffee here, a walk there. Nothing fast, nothing loud, just steady, like a song you already knew the words to, even if you had never heard it before. She made me feel like I belonged, like maybe I didn't have to keep hiding who I was. Amanda had that way about her. Soft voice, firm opinions. She liked old movies and spicy food. She said she'd never dated a Mexican before, but that it made her feel alive. At first, I didn't know what that meant, but I was too caught up in the warmth of being chosen to question it. 6 months into dating, she started asking about my past, where I came from, how I got here, what my family was like. I told her about my mother's illness, my younger brother's dreams of finishing school, and how I worked 2 jobs to keep the money flowing back home. She would get quiet during those stories, her eyes always watching me, like she was trying to memorize every piece of me. It felt good, like maybe I didn't have to carry the weight alone anymore. Amanda moved in with me after a year. My apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, a leaky faucet in the kitchen, and a neighbor who played guitar badly until midnight. But we made it ours. She hung photos on the wall, bought lavender-scented candles, said she liked the coziness of our life, and I believed her. I started to dream again, of becoming legal, of maybe opening a small restaurant one day, of building something here with her. So when she proposed the idea of getting married, I didn't hesitate. She asked me, not with a ring, not on one knee, but over dinner. She said, "You know I love you. Let's stop pretending like we don't belong together. Let's make it official." I was stunned. No one had ever offered me security like that before. She promised she didn't care about my status. That love was enough, that she would handle everything. I didn't think it was a trap. Why would I? She was the woman who rubbed my shoulders after double shifts, the woman who brought me soup when I had the flu, the woman who told me she wanted kids with my eyes and her fire. She made me feel seen in a world that treated me like a shadow. The wedding was small, a courthouse ceremony with 2 friends of hers as witnesses. No flowers, no music, just vows whispered under fluorescent lights and a piece of paper. That said, we were now one. She cried. I smiled. I remember holding her hands and thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of everything I never thought I'd have. After that, we were unstoppable. At least that's how it felt. She handled all the immigration paperwork. I signed whatever she put in front of me. She said not to worry about the language, about the process. "You trust me, right?" she'd say. And I did. God, I did. She opened a joint bank account, said it would help with the application. Asked for access to my personal account, too, just to make sure all the transfers were consistent for the USCIS. I didn't think twice. I gave her everything. Because in my heart, I was already hers. I bought her birthday gifts she didn't ask for. Took her out for anniversary dinners I could barely afford. Every month, I sent money to Mexico. Every night, I came home to her. It was a life that, from the outside, looked normal. But for me, it was everything. Stability, love, a dream. Right. But then, things started to shift, slowly, like a glass cracking under pressure. Not enough to shatter, just enough to make you nervous. She started getting irritated whenever I talked about Mexico, especially when I sent money home. "How long do you plan to keep paying for them?" she asked once, slamming a cabinet door. You have a life here now, with me. I told her they were my family, that they needed me. She said she needed me too, and she started to ask questions she hadn't before. Did you ever love anyone back there? Did you ever think of staying with someone else? What if they're just using you? At first, I thought it was jealousy, a sign that she cared too much. I didn't realize it was something darker, something more calculated. She began to remind me, subtly, that I was here because of her, that without her, I had nothing, that everything I had built was because she allowed it. And I started to believe it. That's the part that hurts the most. She betrayed me. But that, I let her. If you've ever given someone your entire heart and later questioned if they even had one, share your voice below. Type, "I trusted too much," in the comments. Because sometimes, speaking it out loud is how we start to take our power back. And if this story feels too close to your own, subscribe. Here, we turn silence into strength. Your presence here matters. I was 22 the day I crossed the border. Young, desperate, and too proud to let anyone see how I was. I remember the heat hitting my face like a wall, the desert wind filled with sand so fine it stuck to the inside of my mouth. The air smelled like dust and gasoline, and the silence was only broken by the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional buzz of insects that seemed to vanish as quickly as they came. There were 5 of us, strangers, yet somehow brothers by circumstance. A man from Michoacan who hadn't seen his daughter in 6 years, a teenager, barely 18, who had tried 3 times before, a woman with swollen feet and eyes that refused to cry, and a guide who said little, only ever looking forward, one hand always near the gun at his hip. We walked mostly at night. During the day, we hid under whatever shade we could find, trees, rocks, even shallow ditches. Our water was limited. Every drop had to count. I remember cupping my hands and drinking rainwater off a leaf one morning like it was gold. We rationed crackers and canned beans like we were soldiers at war. On the 3rd night, I thought I might die. My feet were raw. The blisters had burst, leaving open wounds. My lips were cracked, my tongue swollen. I couldn't speak. The teenager collapsed, shaking from dehydration. The woman gave him her last sip of water. She whispered to him, "You can't die here. Not in this place." That sentence haunts me to this day. We made it to the pickup point at dawn. A rusted pickup truck covered in dust waited at the edge of an old dirt road. Driver didn't speak. He just waved us in like cattle. We crammed into the back, bodies pressed together, too weak to protest. The drive was rough. Every bump sent pain shooting up my spine. But I didn't care. I had made it. I had reached the United States. It wasn't like I had imagined. There were no lights, no clean streets, no music playing in the background like in the movies. There was only fear. The constant fear of being seen, of being caught, of being erased. I landed in Houston because an old friend of my uncle lived there and offered to help me find work. I slept on his couch for the first few weeks, worked odd jobs during the day, and washed dishes at night. I remember the smell of bleach and soap that never left my hands. I remember scrubbing pots until my knuckles bled, and the manager saying, "Faster, amigo, time is money." And yet, I was grateful, because that paycheck, however small, meant something. It meant my mother could buy her insulin. It meant my younger brother could stay in school. It meant dignity, even if the world around me refused to see it that way. I picked up every shift I could. Landscaper by morning, dishwasher by night, handyman on weekends. I learned to sleep on buses, eat standing up, and think in 2 languages at once. My English was broken, but my work ethic was fluent. I sent money home every month without fail, 400, sometimes 600 if I skipped eating out. There were weeks I lived on instant noodles just so I could send a little extra. I remember once walking 40 minutes to work because I couldn't afford both food and the bus. I chose the food. I watched videos of my brother's school presentations on a cracked phone screen. I listened to my mother's voice shake when she said she missed me but was proud. I cried silently at night so no one would hear me in the shared apartment. The other men cried too. We all pretended we didn't. Over time, I got used to the rhythm. Wake up, work, send money, repeat. It became my life. I stopped dreaming about anything else. Relationships, rest, joy, all of it became luxuries I couldn't afford. I told myself this was temporary, that someday I'd be able to go back home and open a little taqueria, that I'd hug my mother again, that I'd finally sleep without checking over my shoulder. Years passed like that. I upgraded from the couch to a room I rented with 2 other men. Then eventually, I had a small place of my own. I bought my first mattress, my first coffee maker. I remember crying the first time I sat on a real chair at a table I bought. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every milestone here felt stolen, like I was trespassing in a country that didn't want me, like at any moment, someone would yank it all away. But I kept going, because survival teaches you to find beauty in scraps, like the way the morning air smelled after a rainstorm, or the quiet hum of the bus at 5 a.m. when the city was still asleep, or the feeling of seeing a transfer go through and knowing your nephew would have school shoes this month. Those were the moments that held me together. They were the thread between who I used to be and who I was trying to become. If you've ever started from zero, if you've ever given up everything for the ones you love, I want to hear from you. Share your truth in the comments. Write, "I know what sacrifice feels like," so others know they're not alone. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, go ahead and subscribe. This is more than content. This is life, spoken out loud for those who never get the microphone. Building a life with Amanda felt like learning to breathe again. After years of holding it all in, of living in survival mode, of keeping my head low and my voice quieter than the room around me, she brought something into my world that felt almost impossible: normalcy. We moved into a small apartment on the east side of Austin. 1 bedroom, beige carpet, a broken heater that groaned in the winter, and a tiny window that let in just enough light to make the mornings feel like hope. Amanda painted the walls herself, soft gray in the bedroom, warm yellow in the kitchen. She said colors could change moods, that she read it in some article online. I didn't question it. I loved watching her make that space ours. She brought in furniture, mostly second-hand, but it felt like luxury to me. A small blue couch where we'd curl up at night, a coffee table scratched by time but sturdy enough to hold pizza, boxes, and our feet. There was a bookshelf that she insisted we fill together. She added novels, cookbooks, framed pictures of places she wanted to visit. I added a Spanish Bible my mother gave me when I left home, and a small ceramic figurine of the Virgin of Guadalupe. She smiled and placed it next to a scented candle. Every small thing we did felt like a declaration that we belonged, that we were building something real. I worked long shifts during the week, sometimes 14 hours, split between 2 jobs. Amanda would leave me little notes in my lunchbox. "I'm proud of you. Be safe. Save room for dessert." Her handwriting became my lifeline. She cooked dinner most nights. Nothing fancy, rice, beans, roasted chicken, but it tasted like love. We laughed over silly TV shows. We danced in the living room when our favorite songs played. On Sundays, we slept in, curled under a blanket, talking about the future. She said she wanted a child, a little girl with my eyes and her stubbornness. Gay said maybe one day, when things were more stable. She touched my face and whispered, "We're stable now." I wanted to believe that. She brought up paperwork again a few months after the wedding. Said we needed to start my immigration process so I could stop living in fear. I felt a lump in my throat just hearing her say it out loud. For years, I had learned to move like a ghost, unseen, unheard, always watching my back. The idea of finally being able to live openly, it felt like a miracle. She said she would help with the forms, that it was too complicated for me to handle alone. "Let me take care of this," she said, cupping my face in her hands. "You've taken care of everything else." We gathered documents, pay stubs, letters, photos of us together, utility bills with both our names. She even set up a shared bank account to make things more official. USCIS likes consistency, she told me. I didn't understand everything, but I trusted her completely. There were moments when something didn't feel right, like when she asked for access to my personal bank account too. Said it was just in case they needed to verify deposit. Or when she insisted I sign some forms without letting me read them fully. "It's just standard stuff," she'd say. "Don't worry." So I didn't. Because love makes you blind in the most beautiful and dangerous ways. At first, it was easy to dismiss the changes in her tone. She said she was stressed, said she was tired, said she needed space. But I started to feel it in my bones. That something was shifting. She wasn't as affectionate. Her eyes lingered on her phone longer than they did on me. Our conversations became shorter, colder. But then, just when I thought we might be drifting, she would do something small, like leave my favorite snack on the kitchen counter or kiss my forehead before bed. And I'd tell myself, see, you're just imagining things. She still loves you. We hosted her friends once. A dinner at our place. I made carne, asada, and grilled corn. She decorated the table with flowers and string lights. They laughed loudly, asked about my story, my family, my culture. I felt like I belonged. For the first time in years, I wasn't just the immigrant washing dishes in someone else's kitchen. I was a husband, a friend, a man building a life. Amanda beamed that night, told me how proud she was, said I made everyone feel welcome. That was the Amanda I knew, or maybe the version she wanted me to believe in. I sent money home that month, like always. My brother needed help with school supplies. My mother had a doctor's appointment. Amanda noticed the transfer. She didn't say anything at first, but later, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You know, she said, sometimes I wonder who your real family is. Them or me? I froze. I tried to explain that it wasn't a choice, that I loved both. The seed was planted. Doubt, guilt, a quiet war between the past I came from and the future I was trying to build. Still, I didn't push back, because I had spent too long chasing stability to risk losing it now. She said she wanted to handle all our bills, that it would make things simpler. I agreed, said I trusted her. That word again, trust. I handed her control over my account, gave her access to everything, because that's what love is, right? That's what they tell us. But now, looking back, I wonder how much of what we built was real, how many of those moments were sincere, and how many were just carefully placed bricks in a trap I never saw coming. If you've ever given someone every piece of you, only to question if they ever saw your worth, let your voice be heard. Leave a comment below that says, I gave everything. Let this be a place where people like us can speak the truth without shame. And if these words speak to something inside you, don't scroll past. Subscribe. Stay, because your story matters just as much as mine. And together, we won't be forgotten. The signs were there, but, like most people in love, I ignored them. Not because I was naive, but because hope is louder than doubt when you've spent most of your life fighting for something stable. I wanted so badly to believe that Amanda was still the woman who once danced barefoot with me in our kitchen, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone, while salsa music played from my cracked phone speaker. But slowly, things started to change, quietly. At first. Then, all at once, it began with glances, the way she would look at my phone when I was messaging my brother, how her smile would fade when I mentioned sending money back home. One afternoon, she found a bank transfer receipt on the kitchen counter. I had just sent $600 to Mexico for my nephew's school registration. She picked it up, stared at it for a long time, then placed it back down without a word. That silence said more than a scream ever could. Later that night, while we were brushing our teeth, she leaned against the doorway and said, Do you ever feel like you're more loyal to them than to me? I didn't know how to answer. I spat out my toothpaste and looked at her in the mirror. She was half smiling, but her eyes didn't match the curve of her lips. I said, They're my blood, Amanda. She didn't reply, just walked away. After that, he started talking about control. Not directly, not harshly. Just little comments. Let me handle the finances, Emilio. You work too much to worry about bills. Let's keep things in one account. It'll make everything easier for the paperwork. Don't worry about the emails. I already checked them for you. And I wanted to believe it was love, that she was protecting me, that this was what married people did. But something inside me tightened, like a door slowly closing behind me and realizing there's no handle on my side. Then came the papers. A thick envelope arrived in the mail. Amanda was already holding it when I came home from work. She said it was more immigration stuff. Updates from the last forms we submitted. She had a pen ready and a stack of documents spread across the table. She pointed to a signature line and said, Just sign here and here. This is just a renewal thing. I looked at the first page. It had my name on it. Some words I recognized, others I didn't. I asked if I could read it over first. Her eyes narrowed just a bit. "Do you trust me or not?" she asked. The question hit me like a slap. Of course I trusted her. Hadn't I always? So I signed. Twice. Without knowing that those signatures would later be used against me. There's a particular kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any lie. It's the kind that disguises itself as protection, that pretends to be love while quietly building a case behind your back. I didn't know then that Amanda had already begun making copies of my financial records, that she had printed every money transfer I made to Mexico, that she was preparing something much bigger than I could imagine. She started to question me about the past, about people I had dated before her, about a woman I had once helped back home when her son got sick. At the time, I thought Amanda was just feeling insecure. I tried to reassure her, told her I only had eyes for her. But looking back now, it wasn't insecurity. It was strategy. She needed to paint a picture, one where I was using her, one where our marriage wasn't real, one where she was the victim and I was the liar. I didn't realize she had changed the passwords too. Our joint bank account until one afternoon when I stopped by the ATM and couldn't log in. I thought it was a glitch. When I asked her about it, she said she had changed it to protect us. "You never check it anyway," she said, tossing her keys on the table. "Let me handle things. You're always too tired after work." Tired was an understatement. I was exhausted, but not from work, from trying to keep our world together while it quietly collapsed around me. Amanda began sleeping with her phone under her pillow, taking calls in the bathroom, whispering in the hallway late at night. When I asked who she was talking to, she shrugged. "Just work stuff. You wouldn't understand." He was right. I didn't understand. Not yet. One morning, she left a printed form on the kitchen counter. I don't know if it was a mistake or if she wanted me to see it. The document had a heading I didn't recognize, but my name was on it. Below it, in neat handwriting, she had written, "This will be enough." Asked her about it later. She said it was just a draft for a letter of recommendation. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Because sometimes denial is easier than accepting that the person you love is holding the knife. I kept working, kept cooking dinner, kept laughing at her jokes. Because what else could I do? My entire life in this country was tied to her. She wasn't just my wife, she was my legal anchor, my sponsor, my bridge to a life I had fought to build brick by brick, with calloused hands and sleepless nights. But behind my back, she was removing those bricks one by one. And I had no idea I was standing on a trapdoor. If you've ever been made to question your own instincts, if you've ever loved someone so deeply that you silenced the voice inside, warning you, speak your truth in the comments. Right? I ignored the signs, so others know they're not alone in that pain. And if this story is touching something you've buried too deep to talk about, I invite you to stay a little longer. Subscribe if you feel like this space might give your story room to breathe. Because healing begins where silence ends. The moment I saw the paperwork in the agent's hands, I felt the air leave my lungs like I had been punched in the stomach. There it was, my full name, my date of birth, my country of origin, and below it, a note in typed letters that made my hands go cold. Petition to remove resident under fraud suspicion. Filed by spouse. Those 4 words hit harder than any blow I had taken in my life. Filed by spouse. I didn't need to look at the signature to know whose name was there. Amanda. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was her. She did this. The room spun, but everything around me stood still. The 2 officers weren't cruel. They weren't kind either, just indifferent. They explained that I had the right to remain silent, that I could speak to a lawyer, that I would be transported to a holding facility for processing. Their voices faded into a hum, like white noise buzzing in my ears. And behind it all, I could still hear Amanda humming. She was in the kitchen when they walked me out, standing near the sink like nothing was happening, a coffee mug in her hand, calm, almost graceful. Not a single tear in her eyes. No fear, no shame. Just a quiet satisfaction that made the betrayal sting 10 times worse. She didn't come outside, didn't follow me, didn't ask questions or pretend to be shocked. She just stood there, watching, like a spectator in a theater she had produced and directed. The van smelled like metal and disinfectant. The seat was hard and cold. As we drove away, I pressed my forehead against the glass and tried to piece together how we had gotten here. When had the love turned into this? When had the woman who held me through fevered nights become the one who signed the form to tear my life apart? The holding facility was about 40 minutes from the city. No signs, just a gray building behind a tall fence, wrapped in barbed wire. The kind of place where time doesn't move and no one calls you by your name. They took my fingerprints, my belt, my shoelaces, then handed me a plastic bag with shampoo and a toothbrush and showed me to a cot in a room that smelled like damp fabric and sweat. 10 bunks, no privacy, just whispers in the dark, and eyes that didn't blink. The other men there looked like ghosts of themselves, eyes sunken, shoulders low, voices gone quiet from too much waiting. Some there for weeks, others for months, a few for nearly a year. I met a man from Guatemala who hadn't spoken to his kids since Christmas, a teenager from Honduras who had been picked up on his way to school, a father from El Salvador who had been reported by his employer after an argument over missing wages, and now me, the man whose wife handed him over. At night, I couldn't sleep, not because of the thin mattress or the buzz of fluorescent lights, but because I kept replaying every moment, every kiss, every dinner, every touch, wondering when she stopped loving me, wondering if she ever did. During intake, an officer asked if I had any immediate family in the U.S. I said yes, my wife. He looked at the file, then at me. His voice was flat. She's the one who turned you in. That sentence crushed what was left of me. I spent 3 days without speaking, just listening to the guards' footsteps, to the coughs and murmurs of the others, to my own thoughts chasing each other in circles until they made no sense. I remembered a time Amanda and I had gone to the lake, just the two of us. We brought sandwiches and cheap wine. She dipped her feet in the water and laughed like a child. That memory hurt more than anything else, because it was real, or at least I thought it was. That's the worst part about betrayal. It makes you doubt even the good parts, like they were just bait in a trap. On the 4th day, I was called in for an interview. A legal rep from a nonprofit had come to meet me. Her name was Maya, short, sharp, and serious. She didn't waste time. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. I nodded. I couldn't speak. "Did you sign anything you didn't understand?" he continued. I nodded again. He pulled out a document and slid it across the table. "Your wife claimed the marriage was fraudulent, that you used her for immigration benefits. She submitted financial records, texts taken out of context, and bank statements showing you sent money to another woman in Mexico. She also claimed emotional abuse, that you manipulated her and threatened her when she confronted you." I wanted to scream, to deny it all, to pound the table and demand justice, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen. My hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my skin. Maya watched me for a moment, then softened her tone. "This isn't over. We've seen this before. People getting married for love, then one partner turns it into a weapon. There are ways to fight this, but we'll need everything, every photo, every letter, every witness." And just like that, a spark returned to my chest. Not anger, not revenge, survival. The same instinct that carried me across the border, that kept me working through exhaustion, that taught me to endure. It lit up again inside me. I told her everything. From the first day we met to the breakfast with the flowers. I gave her names of co-workers, of friends who knew us as a couple. I described our anniversary trips, the cards we exchanged, the messages Amanda used to send me when I worked late shifts. Every moment of our relationship I could recall became evidence, not just for the court, but for myself, to prove that what we had was real, even if it ended in betrayal. Maya listened. She didn't smile, but she nodded. "It helps," she said. "It helps more than you think." That night, I slept, not well, but better, because I knew this wasn't the end. If you've ever been ripped away from your life without warning, if someone you trusted became the one to take everything from you, I want you to know you're not alone. Leave a comment that says, "I've been betrayed by love." If this story reflects even a piece of your pain, you don't have to carry it in silence. And if you're still here, if you've been listening with your heart open, consider subscribing. This space was built for truth, for voices like yours, like mine. Let's keep it alive, together. In the days that followed, I learned that hope in a detention center does not arrive like a sunrise. It does not bathe you in light or warmth. It arrives slowly, like the quiet drop of water from a leaky faucet, steady and nearly invisible until it becomes something you can no longer ignore. I began to understand that surviving this place wasn't just about enduring the metal beds or tasteless meals. It was about clinging to pieces of identity, of memory, of love that no system could erase. Maya returned on a Thursday. She brought a folder with her, one that had my name written in capital letters across the top. Inside were documents I barely recognized, printouts of messages Amanda and I had exchanged, a receipt from our dinner on our second anniversary, even a selfie we had taken in front of a Christmas tree just 2 years earlier. She said a friend of mine from the restaurant had sent it in, that they remembered how Amanda would come in sometimes and sit at the counter while I finished my shift. That photo became my lifeline, because in it she was smiling, holding my hand, leaning her head on my shoulder like I was her home. And no matter what she claimed now, that moment had been real. Maya explained the process. We would file for a U visa based on being a victim of a crime committed by a citizen or permanent resident. In my case, it was immigration fraud and emotional coercion. It wouldn't be easy. There would be interviews, scrutiny, a mountain of paperwork, and no guarantees. But it was a path. And after everything, even a narrow path was more than I had. I spent hours each day writing my declaration, detailing everything. From the first day I met Amanda to the morning I was taken. I had to relive moments I would have rather forgotten. The day she first made me feel like I owed her for my presence here. The time she told me, during a fight, that she could make all of this disappear if she wanted to. At the time, I thought it was an empty threat, just words thrown in anger. But now, I saw it clearly. It was a warning. There was something heartbreaking about writing it all out. Not just because of the pain, but because I had to break the illusion. I had to stop pretending our love had been unconditional. I had to stop hoping she would walk through those doors and say she was sorry, that she made a mistake, that she wanted to fix it. That apology never came. Instead, I received a letter, delivered by one of the guards. A single sheet, folded once. No return address. It was from Amanda. The handwriting was familiar, slanted to the right, slightly messy. The letter was short. I did what I had to do. You were using me, and I saw it too late. I hope you find peace. I already have. No signature. Just silence between the lines. I sat with that letter for a long time, read it over and over. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to understand what kind of love ends with a sentence like that. I wondered if she had convinced herself of the lie, if she truly believed I had used her, or if it was easier to sleep at night thinking she was the victim. The truth is, sometimes people rewrite their own stories to survive their guilt. They turn kindness into manipulation, sacrifice into strategy, and love into leverage. But I couldn't live in her version of the story. I had to write my own. In the evenings after dinner, I helped another detainee write a letter to his daughter. He didn't speak much English, and his hands trembled as he dictated the words. Tell her I miss her. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't there for her recital. Tell her I dream of her every night. He cried quietly as I wrote. That became our ritual. Every week, he'd tell me what to say, and I'd help him send it to the only person keeping his spirit alive. There were dozens of men like us, stories buried behind steel doors, fathers, sons, husbands, people who loved deeply and lost everything in a single moment. What tied us together wasn't just the walls. It was the quiet resilience of knowing we were still human, in a place designed to make us feel otherwise. One afternoon, Maya came in with news. A preliminary review had accepted our petition. It wasn't an approval, but it was something. She said, they want an interview. You'll need to testify about everything. Under oath. My heart pounded. I was scared. Not because I didn't know my truth, but because speaking it meant reliving it, and because I knew Amanda might be there, or at least her words would be, her version, her story, but I nodded, because if silence was what got me here, then my voice had to be what got me out. The night before the interview, I barely slept. I prayed in Spanish. I repeated the names of my mother, my brother, my nephew like a mantra. I whispered forgiveness to myself for not seeing the warning signs sooner, and I made a promise that if I ever got out, I would tell this story. Not because I wanted revenge, but because no one deserves to suffer in silence. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself After being destroyed by someone you trusted, I invite you to share your voice. Leave a comment below that says, "I am still standing." Let this be a place where we recognize each other not by our pain, but by our survival. And if you believe these stories matter, if you see yourself in these words or know someone who would, please subscribe. This is not just a story. It's a mirror. It's a fire. And you are part of it now. I was given a lifeline, a possibility, when my lawyer, Maya, slid a folder across the table and told me we could file a U visa because I was a victim of a crime committed by a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. I felt, for the first time since that morning at the door, a faint flicker of hope. The crime wasn't what most imagine. It wasn't armed robbery or a violent assault. It was a betrayal cloaked as love. The kind of crime where one signs your name and opens the door to your removal while whispering promises of forever. We looked at the documents together. She showed me printouts of messages Amanda and I exchanged, utility bills with both our names, pictures of us smiling at Christmas, with a tree in the background and our arms around each other. One photo showed Amanda holding my hand in a cafe on a rainy Houston morning. Another showed us on a cheap love seat in the apartment she painted gray and yellow. They seemed from another life. I looked at them and felt the man I used to be. The man she claimed never existed. She told me the statute for filing required proof of substantial physical or emotional abuse or fraud by a perpetrator who is a citizen or permanent resident. The ironic weight of that word perpetrator still stings. She said we had to show this wasn't just a disagreement in marriage. This was manipulation, coercion, fraud. And I realized that I was both victim and witness to my own life. I filed everything she asked for. The small messages I thought were silly. The dinner receipts I believed were memories. The times Amanda held me when I cried after a double shift. Each one became evidence. While I prepared, I lay on the hard cot in the detention center and thought about a time when I first felt hopeful with her. We were at the lake just outside Austin. We brought sandwiches, soda in glass bottles, and laughed because the wind kept blowing our blanket. Her toes in the water, mine in the shallows. She said, "One day we will open a cafe together." And I believed it, because while I washed dishes and mowed lawns, I had never allowed myself to believe I deserved something of my own. Her smile held a promise. And now that smile had a different meaning. I asked myself if it had always been a promise or a contract in disguise. In the detention center, I helped another man write a letter to his daughter. He had tears in his voice when he said, "Tell her I'm sorry I missed her recital." His words made my own echo. Men around me had stories. Some had wives like mine. Some had friends who betrayed them. Others had documents they thought were safe. We became a community of wounded, but still breathing hearts. And I kept sending the money I had earned long ago. Now has meaning. I have to prove worth. Each transfer I once believed was love to my family now also appears in evidence as undue financial influence. I felt my own generosity weaponized. Maya called me one afternoon with news. She said the preliminary review accepted our petition for consideration. Not a victory yet, but an invitation to fight. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might wake the guards. I tried to steady myself by picturing my mother in the village I left behind, waiting for the insulin I sent her. I wondered if she knew what the fight meant now, if she understood my silence and the tears I swallowed so I could send money rather than beg. I realized this case wasn't just about staying. It was about dignity, about proving I was more than an unwanted statistic. That night, I hardly slept. The lights in the dorm never went off. I counted the ceiling panels. I listened for footsteps in the hallway. My mind replayed the day I signed those papers Amanda told me were standard. I asked myself why I didn't ask more questions, why I didn't pause, why I believed love so easily. The walls around me weren't the only bars. Fear and shame were equally strong, but they could never stop hope from rising, just masked it. Tomorrow I would face an interview under oath. I would answer questions not just about what happened, but how I felt. I would face her version of the story, her documents, her accusations. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted the moment I saw the faces of the men at the door to not define me forever. I wanted to walk out and know I still owned my story, regardless of whether the legal outcome was in my favor. If you have ever believed someone loved you only to find out you were part of a plan, leave a comment saying, "I am reclaiming my voice," so others know they are not alone. And if this story touches something in you, subscribe so we can walk through the darkness together and find the light, no matter how faint it seems. The morning of the interview arrived without warning. There was no clock in the cell, but I could feel it, in the way my stomach twisted before I even opened my eyes, in the silence that hovered heavier than usual. A guard tapped the bars gently and said my name. No anger, no urgency, just routine. But for me, nothing about this was routine. They led me to a room that felt colder than the rest of the building. Fluorescent lights hummed above like a low drumbeat. The table in front of me had a recorder, a water bottle, and a small stack of documents. Maya was already seated. She gave me a nod, not a smile. Just a nod, the kind that says, "You are not alone." It was all I needed. A government officer entered, followed by a translator, even though I had told them I was fluent. But protocol is protocol. I chose to speak in English. I needed them to hear me as I am, not just as a man, with a name that sounded foreign, but as someone who lived and worked and loved here. The questions started simply. My full name, my date of entry, how I met Amanda, what our first date was. I described it the way I remembered it. Her red sweater, the coffee shop on Congress Avenue, how she laughed when I spilled a little sugar on the table. The officer barely blinked. He just wrote. Then he asked when we got married, where, and why. Why? That question hit differently. Why did we get married? Not when, but why. I took a deep breath and said, because I loved her. Because I believed in building something real. Because I thought I had found someone who saw me not as a shadow or a statistic, but as a man, a partner. I didn't expect the officer to react. He didn't. But Maya leaned forward slightly, and in that small movement, I felt the weight of my words land somewhere. They asked about the financial accounts, why Amanda had full control, why I signed the forms without reading them, why she submitted evidence against me. I answered every question with the truth, that I trusted her, that she told me it was easier if she handled the paperwork, that I was working long hours and trying to keep our life together, that love makes you blind, but it should never make you disposable. Then came the hardest part, the accusations. They showed me a copy of Amanda's written statement. It claimed I used her, that I only married her for immigration benefits, that I lied about loving her, that I manipulated her and sent money to another woman in Mexico, that I threatened her when she confronted me. My hands were trembling. I clenched them under the table. I said none of that was true. I explained who the money was for, my nephew's school fees, my mother's medicine. I told them Amanda knew all of this, that she even helped me send the first transfers, that she used to say, "You're such a good son." They asked for proof. I gave them the names of my family, old text messages, receipts, bank slips, a picture of my nephew holding a notebook I sent him. I could feel the tension shift slightly. Then they asked what changed, why Amanda would say those things if they weren't true. That question was like a blade. I told them I couldn't speak for her motives, but I could tell them when I first felt something shift. The moment she asked for access to my private bank account, when she began monitoring who I spoke to, when she told me that she felt like I had two families, the day she said she could end this all if she wanted to, that she would make sure I went back with nothing. I said those words felt like bullets in my chest because they weren't said during a fight. They were said quietly, like a promise. They let me speak freely at the end. I looked straight ahead, into nothing, and said, I am not perfect, but I came here to work, to build a life. I fell in love. I believed in that love. I gave everything I had to someone who I thought saw me. And now I am here not because I broke a law, but because I believed the wrong person. The interview ended. They said I would be notified. Maya gave me a reassuring glance and walked out with the folder under her arm. Back in my cell, I didn't cry. I lay on the cot with my hands behind my head and listened to the sounds around me. A guard's keys, a cough 2 bunks down, a prayer whispered in Spanish. I thought about Amanda's eyes the last time I saw her. The cold distance. I remembered how she used to say we were meant for each other. And I wondered what part of that she believed, if any. I thought about people who never get to tell their side, who are silenced by the weight of paperwork and legal terms and betrayal dressed as justice. I promised myself I would keep speaking. Because the truth is not always loud, but it never dies. If you are still listening, still watching, I want to ask something from your heart. If you've ever been made to feel like your love was a lie, just because it didn't end well, share your voice. Comment with the words, "My love was real." Let others know that pain does not erase truth. And if you believe in stories that are often buried under noise and judgment, subscribe, not just to follow, but to stand with those who are learning to reclaim their voices in a world that often tries to take them away. Weeks passed. Time in the detention center didn't move forward like a clock. It circled around you, pulling you deeper into repetition and silence. The light in the common room always buzzed. The guards rotated shifts like clockwork. Breakfast trays had the same bland eggs and cold toast. But in that stillness, something inside me refused to stay quiet. After the interview, I felt different, like I had reclaimed something small but sacred, my right to be heard. One afternoon, I received a message through Maya. The review board had officially accepted my case to move forward. There was no decision yet, no approval, but it meant I wasn't being deported. Not today. And in a place like this, not today meant everything. I held on to those words like a rope in a flood. Other men started asking me questions. They had seen the way Maya treated me differently now, with a respect they hadn't seen before. I told them about the U visa, about the protections it could offer. Some had been through worse than me, abused by employers, exploited by people who promised them help and then turned them in. One man told me his landlord threatened to report him if he didn't fix plumbing in the building for free. He had no papers, no voice, just silence in exchange for survival. I told him silence wasn't his only option, and that was the moment I realized something. Even in detention, I had found a kind of purpose. Not because I wanted to be here, but because I knew the system wasn't built to protect people like us. So if I had a window, just a crack, I needed to use it. Not only for myself, but for every man who sat in that room, wondering if anyone would ever see them as more than a number. I started helping others write declarations, translating for those who didn't speak English, writing letters to wives, children, churches. I didn't have legal training, but I had something more powerful. I had been where they were, and I had decided not to drown. But even then, there were days I felt like disappearing. Memories would hit me when I least expected. A smell in the hallway that reminded me of Amanda's shampoo. A laugh that sounded like hers. I would catch myself imagining what she was doing right now. Whether she missed me, whether she had already moved on, whether she even thought of me as a person anymore, or just a mistake she had to clean up. Grief doesn't always come from death. Sometimes it comes from realizing someone is alive and well, and choosing to live without you. One night, I received a package. It had been approved through security. Inside were letters from my brother, my nephew's drawing, and a photo of my mother. Her eyes were tired, but her hands still held the strength of 10 lifetimes. She wore the necklace I had sent her 2 Christmases ago, the one Amanda helped me pick out. I stared at that picture for hours. I remembered what I was fighting for, not just for my right to stay, but for my right to matter. In the next court update, Maya told me something unexpected. Amanda had withdrawn one of her statements. Not all of them, but one. The one claiming I had threatened her. It didn't mean the case was over, but it raised a question. Why would she suddenly pull that part back? Guilt? A lawyer's advice? Or maybe, in a quiet moment, the truth had pressed too hard on her chest to ignore. It didn't change everything, but it changed something. And in a case like mine, even a shift that small can be life-changing. I sat with Maya in our next session and asked her if it made a difference. She nodded. A withdrawn statement is still evidence of inconsistency. In a system where most of the accused don't even get the chance to speak, anything that weakens the accuser's credibility is critical. It might mean I'd get a real shot at staying, not just waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was possibility. I started dreaming again, not in the hopeless way that makes your chest hurt, but with clarity. I saw myself walking out of that place, not in shackles, not into a deportation van, but into daylight. into a world
Could
where
begin
where I could tell my story without shame. I thought about opening that cafe Amanda once joked about, maybe on my own, maybe with someone who believed in me for real this time. I imagined painting the walls yellow like she wanted, but this time on my own terms. I saw my mother visit for the first time. I saw my nephew with flour on his nose in the kitchen. I saw freedom, not just as a place, but as something I deserved to feel inside. And I knew, even if the system said no, even if the answer didn't come fast, I would keep fighting, because I was more than the papers they filed. I was more than Amanda's signature. I was a man who had learned what betrayal feels like, but I had also learned what resilience tastes like. If you've ever felt buried by someone else's version of your story, if you've ever had to reclaim your identity one broken piece at a time, leave a comment that says, "I still believe in myself." Let others know that pain can be a beginning, not just an ending. And if this journey has touched a place inside you that still hopes, still wants, still believes, subscribe. Not for the algorithm, not for the views, but because stories like these are how we stitch ourselves back together, one truth at a time. I began to notice the smallest details again, the way the dust hung in the light that slipped through the cracks in the wall, the rhythm of footsteps outside the cell door, the sound of someone softly singing in Spanish 2 bunks over. I was still locked inside, still waiting, but my heart had started beating with a little more purpose. I had no control over how long it would take for a decision to come, but I had control over how I waited. Each morning, I began with a routine. I folded my blanket with precision. I cleaned the area around my bed. I helped older detainees who struggled with forms or needed help translating letters from lawyers. I wasn't just passing time. I was reclaiming myself. Even here, even now, I could still be someone who helped others breathe a little easier. Word began to spread. Men who had been silent for weeks started coming to me quietly, asking if I could help them write their stories. A man from Haiti, who had survived a journey so cruel I couldn't sleep after hearing it. A teenager from Venezuela, who had no family, no contacts, and no idea what would happen to him. I became their scribe, their translator, their witness. In helping them, I helped myself. One afternoon, a guard called my name and handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it with trembling hands, thinking it might be the decision. But inside was something unexpected. A handwritten letter from Amanda. It wasn't long, but it was enough to reopen wounds I thought had scabbed over. She wrote that she had seen parts of the interview transcript, that she didn't expect me to forgive her. But she said she hadn't realized how deeply her actions would break me. She ended the note with something I couldn't stop reading. I thought I was saving myself. I didn't know I was destroying you. I read it again and again, looking for truth, for remorse, for manipulation. It was probably all three, or maybe just confusion scribbled in cursive. I didn't write back. I wasn't sure I ever would. Because forgiveness isn't something you owe. It's something you choose. And sometimes, the most honest form of healing is silence. That night, I lay on my back and thought about all the versions of myself I had lived through. The boy who crossed borders with a fake name and a prayer, the dishwasher who fell in love, the husband who trusted too much, the detainee who almost disappeared, and the man who had somehow become a leader, even behind bars. I realized that my story was no longer just about Amanda. It was about every moment I had refused to give up. It was about my mother, still wearing the necklace I sent her, probably praying right now under the same roof where I was born. It was about my nephew, drawing superheroes with crooked teeth and capes that looked like flags. It was about every man in that center who was more than the label they'd been stamped with. And it was about the version of me I was still becoming. A few days later, Maya visited again. She looked tired, but hopeful. She said more evidence had come in from our community. Friends, co-workers, even one of Amanda's cousins had submitted letters. People had started to speak, to say they remembered seeing us together, laughing, holding hands, shopping for groceries like any couple. One woman had written that she remembered Amanda showing off the ring proudly, that she used to say, "I was the kindest man she'd ever known." That letter almost made me cry, because it meant I hadn't imagined everything. that someone out there remembered a truth I thought had been erased. Maya told me the board would likely have a decision soon, that everything was in place, but that no matter what, I needed to prepare for both answers. Hope is dangerous in places like this. It can build you up just to crush you. But so is hopelessness, and I chose to live in the space between, with open eyes, a steady breath, and a heart that beat to remind me I was still here. I closed my eyes and pictured my mother's kitchen, the way the steam curled from her pot of pozole, the worn wooden table where I did homework as a boy. I remembered her voice, saying, "You can bend, but you don't break." That phrase lived in my bones now. Whatever happened next, who had opened his door that morning to find agents and betrayal. I was someone who had stood up, even when the ground beneath him cracked open, and that, in itself, was something to be proud of. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself after being torn apart by someone you trusted, write in the comments I found my strength. Let your story join mine in the quiet revolution of healing. And if you believe these stories matter, if they reflect the truth, too many are afraid to say, subscribe. This space is not just for listening, it's for remembering, for believing, for becoming whole again. It happened on a Thursday, just after lunch. I was sitting with Miguel, helping him write a letter to his mother, when a guard walked in holding a white envelope. He didn't smile, he didn't say anything. He just handed it to me and walked away. My hands shook as I held it. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. I knew what this envelope meant. It was the decision. I stood up slowly, walked to the corner of the room, and sat on the cold floor. I didn't want to open it with trembling hands, so I pressed it against my chest first. I whispered a prayer in Spanish, then another in English, just in case one traveled faster than the other. I thought of my mother. I thought of every night she waited by the phone, hoping to hear my voice. I thought of my nephew, who still believed I was a superhero. I thought of Amanda's smile that once gave me wings and later clipped them without warning. I thought of myself, all the versions of me who had made it this far. I opened the envelope. The words swam in front of me, but I saw it. I saw the word approved. My chest collapsed. My knees gave out. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second, I thought I might die right there on the concrete floor from the sheer weight of what that word carried. I had been approved. I was not going to be deported. The room fell silent as I slowly stood up and read it again. And again. I showed it to Miguel. He blinked, stunned, then wrapped his arms around me. The others followed. We didn't speak. We just stood there, a circle of men with different languages and histories, bound together in that moment by hope. When Maya came to see me the next day, she was already smiling. We didn't talk much. There weren't many words needed. He handed me a new packet of papers, explained the next steps, and said something I would never forget. You're free to live your life again, not start over. Continue, continue. That word felt more powerful than any I had heard in months. Because I wasn't the same man who had walked into this place, I wasn't trying to go back to who I had been before Amanda's betrayal. I was moving forward. With scars, yes, but also with a sense of self I had never known before. I had been broken and buried, but I had not disappeared. I had survived. The day I walked out, the sun was blinding. I squinted into the light, felt the air on my face, and for the first time, in what felt like a lifetime, I could breathe without fear. There was no Amanda at the gate, no one waiting to pick me up. But that didn't hurt like I thought it would, because I was enough. I didn't need anyone to validate my freedom. I didn't need someone's love to make me feel whole. I had walked through fire and found myself on the other side. I eventually moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a bed, a table, and a window that caught the morning light. I found work in a bakery. I sent my mother the first video call she'd seen in months. She cried the moment she saw my face, and I cried too. Not because I was sad, but because I had made it. I kept writing, not legal letters anymore, but memories. I wrote down everything. The lake trip with Amanda, the morning I was taken, the cell, the interview, the silence, the strength. I wrote so that I would never forget, so that others could find something of themselves in my story and know they are not alone. Some people ask me if I don't know if love is the word anymore. I think I mourn her, the version of her I believed in, the life I thought we were building. But I do not hate her, because hate would make her the center of my story again, and she no longer holds that place. I forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine, because forgiveness, real forgiveness, is freedom. Today, I speak for those who still wait behind bars, for those who are still afraid to tell the truth, for those who believed in love and were left holding nothing but silence. I speak for them because I was one of them, and I know how heavy that silence can be. If you have made it this far, thank you. From the deepest place in my heart, thank you for walking this road with me. Your presence matters, your attention matters, and your empathy changes everything. If you felt something in this story, something familiar, something painful, something hopeful, please let it live on. Comment below "I made it through," and let someone else see your strength reflected in theirs. And if you believe these voices need to be heard, if you want more stories that carry truth, grit, and healing, please subscribe. Every subscription is a promise that you will keep listening, keep caring, keep remembering. Now, as this chapter closes, another begins. Click on the next video on your screen. Let this journey continue. Let our stories echo louder than the silence that tried to bury them. Thank you for everything. You are not alone, and neither am I.